Welcome back to Talent Take 5. I'm your host, Andrew Sterling. And today we're diving into the seismic shift that's happening in leadership development, why Harvard Business School just overhauled how they train future CEOs, and what it means for how we hire and develop talent. My guest today is a friend of mine, Rob Toomey, founder of TypeCoach, an attorney turned interpersonal coaching guru. Rob's been studying personality types for over 20 years, and he's got some hot takes for us on all things coaching, interpersonal communication, and AI applications in team building. Rob, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Rob, you've been in the personality type space for a long time, decades. What's the biggest shift you're seeing right now in how organizations think about developing their people?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic moment, right? So the field is certainly shifting. I think we've been over on one side of the stage doing this interpersonal communication skills for 20 years, and the spotlight is moving over to our section of the stage. So the need for what we teach is becoming more clear to our clients for a number of reasons. The advent of AI is taking away some of the more technical skills, which is putting to the forefront, the interpersonal competencies. And then the other piece is the younger generations in the workforce have been spending a lot more time with their devices than making eye contact. So upskilling them in this interpersonal competency is becoming more of a priority for our clients as well.
That's a good segue into our first hot take in looking at interpersonal competence as a new technical skill. We were talking a little bit before this that the personality testing market is really exploding. I mean, it's $10 billion today. It's projected to hit $57 billion by 2034. And you're saying that this interpersonal communication and relationship building is really a competency that we should be looking at through the technical lens like we would if it was Excel proficiency.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about where we are in the sort of progression of AI, we're still in the very early days. So if you fast forward a year, 18, 36 months, a lot of the sort of hardcore technical skills are going to be consumed by and done by the AI, which means that leaders are going to be looking around being like, well, what is it that you need me to do? And the answer is navigate the interpersonal elements, right? The more effective you are as a communicator, the more inspirational you are as a leader, the better your performance. It's not going to come down as much as it used to on the pure technical skills. So if you look at it in the context of learning how to do a complex financial modeling, well, the AI is going to do that. So what is it that you need to do instead? And the answer is, deal with your colleagues more effectively.
When you're working with a new client, how are you grading their and assessing their interpersonal competence?
It's interesting, right? So our typical client intake process, they have a burning issue that they're trying to fix. And so my sort of initial conversation with them is, what are those issues? Is it retention? Is it engagement? Is it conflict, miscommunication, et cetera? Whatever that is, I then ask them, would improving the interpersonal communication among those players help? And they're like, oh my gosh, that's really the heart of the issue. So they tend to be fairly aware of the need for improvement in that category when we come onto the scene. And then our job is to get the initial pilot if we get the initial pilot going, then they walk out and like, that's an essential skill set that everyone needs to have. So in our session, just so you get a little context, we're teaching people how to identify the personality type and communication style of others based on observable clues. Right. So is this person more of an extrovert or more of an introvert? And once I have that information, I have a suggested idea of what they are. What can I do to adapt my style accordingly? So from a communication perspective, people tend to start with the golden rule and they give other people information in a way that they would themselves like to receive it, which doesn't work if the person receives information and processes it quite differently from you. So the real process that we're teaching them is adaptive communication. How do I discern what the best approach to take for this person is? And then how do I follow that? And immediately people start to realize they've been doing it wrong for a long time, and that these little minor adjustments make a huge impact on terms of the trust within the team, the ability to move quickly to get results. All that stuff falls into place.
Now, do you have a way of determining the level of trust coming in, right? And I think we'll dig into this with some of the work you've been doing more recently, but just over the course of doing this for 20 years, I'm sure you go into some organizations where there's a lot of broken trust. And how do you get companies to embrace change when there's significant trust broken?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know on a 1 to 10 scale where our average client is on trust when we show up. Part of that's the intake process, talking to the leadership team, talking to our colleagues in HR. Where's this team at? Where's this function at? Where's this division at? Where's this organization at from a trust perspective? And against that backdrop, we can then get to work. But most trust issues are either rooted in or magnified by basic personality differences. And so once you start to articulate, well, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm driven to be reliable and responsible, not because I want to shut down your change initiative. I just want to make sure we do it right. A lot of the intentionality is taken out of it, and people start to say, all right, well, how can we get your perspective integrated into what we're trying to do, as opposed to just having it be like, I can't hear what you're saying and you can't hear what I'm saying.
It's interesting. So much of this is helping to predict future conflict resolution and finding a way forward and mending trust. To kind of pivot into our second hot take is we talked a little bit about how does AI integrate into this framework, right? You've seen some great data in how companies have turned around their internal team building and ability to solve problems when they understand who's on the other side of the table. Where does AI fit into this? Is this going to restrict? Is this going to empower? Where do you see it going?
I think it's going to empower for sure. So right now, if I sat down with an executive at a company and over the next 9 months worked with this person to become the best version of themselves as a leader, spoon feeding them specific advice given their situation, helping them navigate all the interpersonal challenges that they face, we would make a real impact. That's not scalable, but AI can do that. AI can literally provide the same quality of advice in a bite-sized spoon feeding kind of way over the course of months or even years to that executive, and also to people far below them in the organization who would never justify an executive coach coming in and helping them get through their sort of early days of their career journey. But that's where AI, I think, has a huge opportunity. And in our case, the AI that we built is providing context-specific advice based on the user's personality. So it's not just like generic, here's how you handle the situation. It's like, here's what's going to be easy for you given your 4-letter code, and here's what's going to be challenging, and I'm going to walk you through it. That's really remarkable because the AI can do that at scale in a way that, just hasn't been possible before.
What I found very interesting about using the AI language models is when you actually give it a personality, when you assign a persona to it. And I'm curious your reaction to that type of thought process where we're basically creating a teammate and assigning it oftentimes its own personality type. So what's your reaction to that, and what kind of guidance might you give somebody who's taking that approach and leveraging the technology?
I think it's a very novel idea. I don't see any problems with it. The key thing for me is actually it's like right next door to that, which is I want the AI to know where I'm coming from for two reasons. Number one, to give me the information in a way that I find most sort of easily digestible. And number two, to make sure that it's covering my back on the parts that I'm not necessarily going to think about. So if it knows my personality, for example, it's going to like, hey, listen, Rob, this is a great idea, but you probably need to get a little bit further into the details and your action planning than you'd like, than your preference would be if you really want to make this successful. And if then the AI says, can I help? I'm like, absolutely. That's the
Right.
remarkable thing. If it can provide that counterbalance to my natural capacities, then it's really, really augmenting something powerful.
It's a great point, and I think part of optimizing for this type of application is really in setting the direction with it so that it doesn't just become an echo chamber and listen and agreeing with whatever sentiment you have, right? If we're gonna get at better outcomes, I think there needs to be some healthy conflict if we're going to get at improvements. And I think that's a good segue for the third hot take, looking for healthy tension in teams. I think AI can integrate into that. But I'd love to talk about what you've been doing most recently with Harvard in their MBA program at Harvard Business School. So I guess the hot take being healthy tension is important, and more important than having harmony all the time in your teams. So for the listeners or folks that are watching, can you tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing with the Harvard Business School most recently and what that's looked like?
Sure, absolutely. And I'm with you, by the way, on that tension being essential for high performance, right? You can either have harmony or you can have high performance. If you go for high performance, you're going to have that sort of tension, that conflict, the pull in multiple directions. but you need to be able to integrate the different perspectives within the team if you really want to unlock the greatness, in my opinion. Yeah, so
For sure.
the HBS work has been really interesting. They came to us because they were experiencing some challenges where they're sending their students off on this really incredible immersion experience. 6-person teams were sent to 16 different countries for a 10-day immersion, solving a real business challenge with an actual customer on the ground. The challenge was it's a stressful environment. There's no hierarchy within the teams, and you have people from very diverse backgrounds, professionally speaking, who are sort of, butting heads. And it actually was requiring a number of faculty interventions, which the sentiment was when we arrived on the scene, we're putting them in an amazing learning environment, but we're not giving them the resources to be successful. And so
Interesting.
we came in and we basically provided them our training and access to our platform with the goal of having them build out a team playbook that would ultimately govern how they would conduct themselves as a team in light of the composition of the personalities within the team, the communication preferences, and all the variables that we teach on our program. We also taught them our stress program. These environments are quite stressful. And what we know about stress is that it's actually easier for me to see someone else's early warning signs than for that person. And so we empowered them to basically say, I think you are starting to get a little stressed out. Let's take some, go for a walk, take the pressure off the situation right now. And that I think was a big part of, some fairly dramatic results that we showed. So in 2024, prior to our involvement, 45 out of the 160 teams had required an intervention of some kind by the faculty. And in this year, we only had one team that needed it.
I mean, that's a remarkable example and data set. And what was some of the feedback that you got from people that were actually, leveraging the tool? What other learnings did you guys get out of that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was driven by the scenarios that we wrote, where we embedded personality clues into the scenarios, and the students had to work through what was the reason why the conflict was emerging. When you get to an underlying understanding of what the conflict is based on, and you realize it's just a personality difference, like you're seeing things from a big picture, future focused perspective, and I'm looking at it from a more granular here and now perspective. Both of those perspectives are valid and important, but they are different. And this is going back to your tension. Like, all right, so if both of those are important and valuable, how do we reconcile them into a shared sort of articulation of the situation so that we can get the benefit of both of those perspectives? And once you understand that it's not Rob or Andrew, it's not a personal thing, it's just a wiring difference, it also allows for a much faster path to getting to that sort of mutual understanding.
What I find interesting too, and maybe you can share some additional context just around the program itself and how they apply this, but it's in a more real world application, right? Like this is beyond just academic theory. Like that's actually they're embedded in real business outcome scenarios, correct?
That's right. Yeah, they're working with the leadership team of a real company in that country for 10 days to work on an actual challenge. And so, they actually are meeting with senior executives and working through their recommendations. It's an incredible program from a learning perspective, what they're being exposed to, what they're being given as an opportunity. And this is all happening in some corner of the globe that they're not from. So that you have the added component and complexity of trying to navigate that cultural
Mm,
difference and sort of you're still jet lagged, right? And an
yep.
intense experience.
You find out very quickly if you surround yourself with people who only think like you that your blind spots get bigger. Do you think that we should be hiring then for, cognitive diversity instead of pure culture fits? Obviously kind of going off of that. You don't want to work with everybody that's all the same. Should we intentionally be trying to hire different personality types to get the full map? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really healthy conversation, right? So, I never want considering the cognitive diversity or the cognitive preferences of a candidate to be by any means a selection criteria. Like you don't say we can't have you because, but it should be part of the conversation in terms of like, well, we currently have a composition of X, and so that means we're really good at this. Wouldn't it be great if we had a different perspective to come in? And so I think that's a healthy conversation. And we have had some clients where we're sit in the sort of diversity segment of their business where they're looking at it in terms of who are we recruiting effectively, who are we retaining, and who are we promoting, and is there a mix of different perspectives in there, or do we have a homogeneity, which it becomes problematic for sure.
And what's your take on the current state of personality fit assessment type? in the hiring process, right? I think there's a lot of movement with integrating testing into hiring processes. Any guidance for, say maybe a head of HR that's looking at integrating that type of strategy within their hiring framework?
It's a space that I stay as far away from as possible. Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because, if you introduce something like what we teach to someone who's a candidate for a role, they're going to steer their experience of the process in light of what they think they need to do in order to be a candidate. So it skews everything. And that's generally speaking how I view the pre-hire screening programs. I don't know that you're getting an accurate look at what that person is. I think they're going to try to steer it to, if they're going for a customer service role and you ask them, do you like interacting with people? Highly unlikely that they're going to say no there, right?
No,
So,
right. Yeah.
so I've got a healthy skepticism for it. I know that there are lots of great applications for it. It just hasn't been our sort of focus.
Looking through the lens of the candidate experience, that you have to take a test, right, to figure out if this is going to be a good place to work. But it's an interesting conversation. But the bulk of the work is once you're in, right? When you're actually on a team, figuring out that cultural fit. But really interesting. As we pivot into the fourth hot take around team makeups, the last 5 years or so, we've seen a big change. And although that change is kind of radically moving again with return to office, but remote work. And remote work really requires intentional skill development. You've mentioned that digital employees that are entering the workforce have some challenges going through this interpersonal interaction and building strong communication. I'm curious your reaction on the state of the digital remote workforce ecosystem and how you see this interpersonal communication challenge playing out over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's fascinating, right? So it's actually going to come back to trust pretty quickly. It's much harder to build trust when you don't have those non-transactional in the hallway interactions, just casually connecting. And what I always point out to distributed teams, remote teams, whatever, when was the last time that you scheduled a meeting with a colleague where there wasn't a work component in the conversation? And the answer is it never happens, right?
Never.
You're
Yeah.
always, you set up the meeting because you need to get something done. And that's so different than how it is when you're just in the office where you're having all those non-transactional interactions. From a personality perspective, we know that everyone needs non-transactional interactions to build trust. Certain personality needs them more. For them, it's actually the fuel. It's more important than the paycheck or the promotion, is that sense of that connection, and the person is committed to me as an individual as opposed to just getting the work done. So if there's one thing that you can take away listening here, it's schedule non-transactional interactions with your
Yeah.
remote colleagues. And by the way, it can be short, like 5-10 minutes, just a quick check-in, like, hey, how you doing? What are you doing this weekend? All the conversations that we, should be having that aren't happening because there's no space for them because we're focused on getting stuff done, which actually counterintuitively, if we only focus on that, we're basically wearing down the relationship quality and eroding trust.
Have you seen any other de-skilling within teams operating largely virtually?
Yeah, I think you have to really lean in proactively to do things like share props, because you just don't have the opportunity to say in the lunchroom, hey guys, Julie crushed it on this. I just want to let you know. So you have to digitally recreate or manufacture that. So like for our team, for example, on our Slack channels, we have a props channel, right? Where it's like, please go in there and say, I was just really psyched that Nicole got back to our client so quickly today. Things like that go a long, long way, and we forget about it in favor of moving quickly through our to-do lists. And actually, it hurts us in the long term.
Yeah, and some leaders might struggle with this because they are so deadline driven, so objective oriented, and this is something that happens in the moment. What recommendation would you give to leaders specifically to approach this with a greater level of authenticity?
It's an investment, like any other investment. You might not see the payoff immediately, but it's there. And so the leap of faith is dedicating time to the effort and then wait and see the response and the results. And you will see them. I've never met an executive who didn't take the leap of faith and then realize the benefit of it quite quickly in terms of how much more engaged, how much more responsive people were when they felt that there was that relationship investment. It's when you talk to people who are 20 plus years in their career who match the profile that you're describing in terms of like hard charging, get it done, the first thing they say is that that was hard for them to learn. They learned it, they get it, they do it. All right. So it's just a learning curve for them to go through.
And I'm really curious too, the applications of what we're talking about as it relates to learning, right? Because we talked a little bit about this beforehand. I think there's been a lot of, I think about when I was a recent grad, there's been a lot of learning by osmosis, by surrounding yourself with people that are smarter, that are already doing the job, that have more experience. And I think there's a gap there in learning within the virtual world. I think that's an ongoing problem. But I'm curious to get your thoughts to lead into our fifth hot take on the future of learning through the lens of, interpersonal moments. Where do you land on this? Are you more big workshop or are you more real time in the moment coaching? I think I know the answer.
I want it all, Andrew. I want it all. I want a long, long window of time to work with anyone who's trying to learn something as complex as dealing with other people. This is not a 5-minute thing where oh, I get it. People are complex. The dynamics that you're dealing with are complex. It's almost like learning a new language. So you have to approach it with the same appetite, which is how do I, over the course of multiple months, become not just decent and then proficient, but really, how do I master this? And I think that the skill set that we're describing, this interpersonal competence, is going to become more and more of a priority item and a way for people to distinguish themselves in the leadership category. What this means in terms of delivery is, we were talking about this before, the appetite for a full day workshop is gone. They still do this in certain parts of Europe, but for the most part, the maximum time window that you're getting these days is a 2-hour learning experience. That's not enough, right? So what we're doing with our clients, and this is our best practice, is to stage out those 2-hour segments over a multiple month window, providing them with support through our platform so that they're getting ongoing applications and opportunities to learn and apply in between each of those live sessions. And then the live sessions have to be interactive, right? I mean, the learner's attention span has diminished. So we need to get them talking as quickly as possible. So ideally, the learning is introduce a concept, put them in groups, let them talk about it. And for me, it's when they use the language of personality, in our case, to connect to their own experience, that's when the learning starts to crystallize. And you know that they're going to continue to do that long after the session is done, or at least until the second, third program lines up. And then I think there's an opportunity, and this is where we're heading, I think, with AI, for there to be an AI coach who's helping you implement and supporting you. And if we do our job right, based on your personality, it's giving you nuanced suggestions that are not just universal in nature. And for us, this is really cool because it can be context specific. Like, here's the situation I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with a sales rep, or I'm dealing with, an engineer. And the AI can provide advice that's so specific to the situation, incorporating the personality elements and changing how easy it is for that person to implement.
It's so interesting thinking about that AI as coach and the learning applications there when it's embedded within the teams. When you're going in and figuring out learning style, how do you figure that out? Because if you're going to make recommendations, not everyone learns the same way. What's your best practice and what's been your guys' approach as you figure out how people learn best?
We feel like we've got a cheat code for this because we understand the personalities in the room before we walk in. I don't want to say that we knew everything beforehand. We've learned a lot along the way. So we have pre-work to our first session. It's a learning experience. It's not an assessment. And you go through and you learn about your own personality. And what was interesting is we didn't appreciate how beneficial that learning experience was going to be for the introverts, right? The introverts make up about 50% of the population. And what we know is they do their best thinking when they have a time to reflect on it. Somewhere between 2 and 48 hours after complex information is introduced, their best thinking emerges. Well, the pre-work allows them to do that. And so they come into the first time I did it was with a client up in Boston where I looked at the data and I saw we had about 70% introverts. It was a group of lab scientists, which makes sense, right?
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
I was prepared. I was prepared for a relatively quiet day as a facilitator, but absolutely different than my expectation because they'd had all the information in advance and they arrived with a ton of questions. So that's honoring the learning differences in the room, providing them their preferred style of, how they want to assimilate the information. And we do a lot of little things like that throughout the course of the programming, and are trying to give them information through the platform, especially that's really designed for them based on their personality.
That's great stuff, Rob. So those are sort of the hot takes, but I've got some questions I want to go over with you. Introvert or extrovert, who makes a better CEO?
Good question. We see a really wide range. So I don't think that there's a winner. How they approach it is very different. Right. And I talk a lot about when we introduce the concept of authentic leadership, for example, I interpret that to mean people see me for who I really am and I'm a good leader, as opposed to I'm manufacturing a persona that I think is what leadership looks like. And people can see that that's just something that I'm fabricating. So the introvert leader, the introvert CEO, is someone that people know is an introvert and leads according to that element, as opposed to forcing themselves manufacturing some sort of fake extroverted style, which everyone's going to see through, right? It's like having someone who's not naturally funny tell a joke to kick off a workshop. Not a great fit because everyone's like,
Doesn't
"What?
land.
You're forcing it, bro."
Every time we've talked, Rob, I think you're so good at assessing the person you're talking to. And what's the best way to spot someone's communication style within the first 5 minutes of talking to them?
It's the questions they ask. The questions they ask are the best indicator for what they need cognitively from you in the conversation to signal, right? So early on in the conversation, if I'm talking to someone about what we do and they're saying, well, how long does it take and how much does it cost and how many people? Those how questions are a signal for their preference for sensing in our language, which is they're more focused on the here and now, what's happening in the moment. So they're going to be looking for an immediate output as opposed to the long-term ramifications. It doesn't mean that I don't talk about the long-term piece eventually. I'm going to front load the application and the impact that it's going to have in the short term because that's where their focus starts. Little clues like that, the questions that they ask is the best place to go.
So you're not a psychic.
Well, so what's interesting is as people go through the learning experience and what we teach, right out of the gate, you're not trying to get all four aspects of someone's personality locked in. You're just looking for the most sort of obvious or the most sort of clear part. And then you tailor your approach to that piece. And then you fill in the rest of it as you go. After a while, it sort of ends up being like hair color. You're not aware of it in the moment, but you can reflect on it afterwards. And we also do what we call pattern recognition, which is this person across from me reminds me so much of someone else I know, and I know that person's
Yep.
personality. I wonder if there's something similar, and you can actually accelerate your identification of others based on that similarity.
What's one personality type that you think every team needs?
I think the opposite, someone who's very different from the leader of that team. Leave it like
Great.
that, right?
Yep.
I mean, because I think you need a diversity on each of the different four aspects that we talk about in our framework. Assuming you have that, you really want to have a person who's counterbalancing the leader so that you don't end up in a echo chamber where you're only having people who are like thinking very similar to that leader, supporting his or her perspective. And then you move ahead and you're missing something that would have been really obvious to someone of a different personality in the room.
What do you think is the most overrated leadership trait?
Well, I perceive that we're moving away from command and control. Do it my way, do it or the highway, right? I think that's leaving. Now, certain industries, you're still going to see that. Certain people are capable of manufacturing that and sustaining it, especially if it's a fit for their culture. But by and large, it doesn't really work that well. It works only for a certain band of personalities who can put up with it. So I think that's leaving the stage.
So just a final question. What's your best advice for any leader who wants to start building, interpersonal competence in their organizations, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah, I mean, there are books, you can learn this, you're on your own, but just think about the people who you have the most difficult time with. It's not their fault. Like often when leaders go through our program, they'll come up to me at lunch or whatever on the side and say, I reflect on some of the people I've had to let go in my career. And it's because I didn't know how to bring out from them what they had. I didn't know how to deal with them. And the mature leader can say that was actually on me. That person was
Yeah.
capable. They could have. I didn't know how to unlock it or I didn't know how to interact with them. So challenge yourself to say, what is it that I could do differently to get either my message across to this person or bring out the best in them? And that question is not an easy one to answer, but it's the game of leadership, in my opinion. And so once you start asking that question, you start earnestly seeking to answer it, you're in the game.
What were some of your biggest takeaways when you really dug into your own personality? I think if you're going to start to implement change, you're leading a team, it starts by taking a real honest stock of yourself. So I'm curious if for yourself, some of your own learnings when you started doing this work.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great learning journey encountering this material back in college and then sort of digging into it. The biggest one for me is seeing yourself in context with others. So it's less about me by myself. It's more like, how am I similar or different to the people around me? So if we take one example, so my brain is wired to think about ideas and possibilities related to the future, but that's only about a 1/3 of the population who are like that. The other 2/3 of the population are more grounded, practical, and realistic. And so the first light bulb that turned on for me was, all right, well, that explains why high school was so awkward, because I would say things that I thought were funny or relevant, and 2/3 or more of the people were like, what the heck are you even talking about? Right. So that's how you see yourself in context. And so what I take away as a colleague, as a parent, as a leader, is to say, how can I translate what's obvious to me into language that other people who are not like me can understand? That continual awareness and attempt to bridge those gaps. It's not, like I said, it's not easy to do, but that's the goal.
And so what is there a personality type name that you fall under from a category perspective?
Yeah. So in our language, I'm on the extrovert side. I'm on the intuitive side, which means that big picture stuff I was talking about. My natural default, my preference is to start making decisions focusing first on the logic. We call that the thinking side of the equation as opposed to the feeling side of the equation. Feelers typically lead with the people piece. And I'm on the perceiving side, which is playful, relaxed, and spontaneous, as opposed to the judging side, which is more planful, structured, and they want to stick to that plan.
Fascinating. So that's Rob Toomey, folks, the founder of TypeCoach. Incredible insights on just the future of leadership development, interpersonal communication, team building. You can find the full episode here on YouTube, Spotify. And Rob, for folks that are interested in following your work and staying in touch with you, how best can they follow you?
Sure. So I'm easily found on LinkedIn, Rob Toomey, look me up. Also check out typecoach.com to learn more there. But always happy to connect with people. So rob@typecoach.com if you just want to email me.
Fantastic. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us again today here on Talent Take 5. That'll do it, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.